When Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels came out, it was a cult hit, and not long after came a torrent of geezery TV shows like Toughest Pubs in Britain, Danny Dyer's Deadliest Men, and films like Green Street. Also a truly bizarre reality show called Britain's Hardest, featuring events like Who Can Kick in the Most Doors the Fastest, hosted by Phil Mitchell from EastEnders. In the decades that followed, male pop culture in Britain was truly in love with the Cockney geezer, who came to represent a sort of archetypal vision of what it meant to be hard. Guy Ritchie, the director of Lock, Stock, gave celebrity gangster geezers like Lenny McLean roles in his films, which at the time gave his stories about British criminals an air of authenticity, even if the stories themselves were somewhat outlandish and convoluted. Jump forward 2 decades, however, and the era of the geezer is long past. Figures like Dave Courtney, rest in peace, are now considered gauche and cliched caricatures. They've been replaced by a younger and more ethnically diverse group that we might refer to as roadmen. The realm of the gangster drama in the UK now belongs to the likes of Top Boy, not Harry the Hatchet. And I think there are elements of the 2019 film The Gentleman that reflect that latent anxiety in Guy Ritchie's audience. You see, the kind of guy who'd stumble back from the pub in 2002 to fall asleep drinking tins while watching Lock, Stock is now at least in his 40s. Chances are he has a safe, well-paying and respected middle-class job, a mortgage and kids. In his younger years, he might have identified with the characters that Ritchie wrote about, or even thought of himself as a scrappy geezer who could hold his own. But I imagine nowadays when he picks up his takeaway, he feels anxious as he passes the teens with their hoodies, incomprehensible slang and puffy jackets. And that's why I think it's fascinating that so much of the B-plot and humour in The Gentleman revolves around the problems caused by a younger generation of gangsters growing up and pushing the older generation out. Whether it's the power struggle between Dry Eye and King George, the immaturity of the toddlers causing problems for Coach, or the Russian kid Aslan, there's a real generational tension on display. There's at least 3 different scenes in this film in which our distinctly middle-aged protagonists humiliate teenagers. There is the fight in the chip shop, which is such an obvious and frankly ludicrous bit of revenge fantasy that if you think about it too long it stops being funny and becomes totally unbelievable. Then the scene in which Raymond, halfway through a home invasion, berates a bunch of student drug addicts and gives an unprompted disparaging monologue about how things were better back in his day. And then the scene that follows that, where a bunch of street kids get humiliated when Raymond does a mock roadman accent before pulling a fully automatic SMG out of thin air.
Easy, lads. I'm sure you're all roadmen, gangsters, proper naughty boys, and all that bollocks. Right.
Granted, 3 is not a particularly high number, but it's pretty strange that it happens this much in one film. And in contrast to most gangster stories, the protagonists of The Gentleman are not down on their luck underdogs like most of the protagonists in Lock, Stock. They are largely successful middle-aged professionals of established standing and reputation. The film almost goes so far as to directly acknowledge this. One of the main problems that faces Mickey Pearson is that he has gone soft, that the middle class have gotten to him. Central to Mickey's arc is the question of whether his time is up, and whether the luxuries he has accrued have made him soft. It's almost as if the film is calling out to its presumably middle-aged audience with this very line. I can really sympathise with Mark Kermode when he says that The Gentleman,
for all the geezery shtick, it's terribly Dean Street, it's terribly Groucho Club, it's terribly, sitting around in a pub I own.
because it feels as though this film was made for an aging millennial and Gen X audience who want to be told that people like them who eat Wagyu steak cooked on smokeless Barbies are still cool and are definitely still hard and have not been lulled into a flabby sedentary middle class existence. And this reading of The Gentleman helps explain why certain scenes hit me the wrong way. Don't get me wrong, The Gentleman is a really fun, good-looking gangster film. It's my favourite of all of Guy Ritchie's films, but scenes like the chip shop or the berating speech made to the drug addicts leave a slightly bad taste in my mouth and feel strangely conservative in tone. You see, gangster drama has often pushed in much more introspective and compassionate directions. Films like Cam with Horses, which came out in the same year as The Gentleman, examine the way in which vulnerable persons are coaxed and groomed into a life of crime. The Pusher series from Nicholas Winding Refn famously meditates on and explores the dysfunction of criminal society, especially Pusher 2, that provides a bird's eye view of the fucked up family dynamics that give birth to those born into criminality, like the perpetually outcasted Tony. And this is why I like crime and gangster films. At their best, they dig deep into themes of moral responsibility, fate, and the way it can push up against social circumstance. It can explore moral and personal quandaries around ideas like loyalty, justice, and the cyclical nature of abuse. The Gentleman doesn't really touch on any of that. For all its flashness, it is bereft of any kind of introspection. In the world of The Gentleman, gangster geezers are cool because they're hard, manly men who say cool things. Drug addicts and low-level street criminals, conversely, are scum who should be treated with contempt. I truly suspect that the film's popularity in part comes from its willingness to indulge a middle-aged, middle-class audience by inviting them to enjoy a gangster film in which the protagonists all live in nice houses, wear nice clothes, drink nice scotch, and like them have a mild to severely antagonistic relationship with everyone under the age of 25 or who has ever said fam unironically. The Gentleman is, among plenty of other positive things, a comfort blanket for aging men who want to be reassured that they've still got it, that the new school hasn't left them behind, and that's largely why I think The Gentleman should be considered a conservative gangster film.